It's time for Saturday Story Time with Mr. Adam, and I'm so glad that you can be with me today. I've got two books that I want to read, and before I get to the first one, I just want to talk to you for just a second about some things going on in our world and around our country. We see lots of unrest, a lot of people fighting and bickering, and a lot of that going on because people look different from others. Maybe you've seen on the news lately that you have people with light skin fighting people with darker skin, and you have in the election time you have states that are colored blue and some states that are colored red, and maybe your parents have been watching the news a little bit more lately around the election, and so you have those people who are following one candidate for president and people that are following a different candidate. I want to remind you today, young people, that you play a very big part in how we as adults really should behave. I want to remind you that God tells us that as His people, we need to be willing to not look at the way people might look on the outside, but we need to know that everybody possesses a soul within them that's going to live for eternity in heaven or in hell. And we need to be willing to accept people no matter what they look like. And so we need to be thinking and talking about this. And so I have a couple of books that I hope today will help us to think about this and the way that God really, really wants us to behave. The first book that I want to read is called Sylvester the Jester, and it's a book on accepting others. All right, Sylvester the Jester. Do you know anybody named Sylvester? Well, neither do I. It's kind of an interesting name, isn't it? But let's think about this book and about Sylvester, all right? Now, you've heard the tales from days of old of famous queens and kings, of castles grand and questing knights and other wondrous things. But have you heard the splendid tale of jolly old Sylvester? He lived in Bingland long ago, the kingdom's finest jester. Sylvester served the king and queen. He served them smiles and laughter. He juggled jugs and mugs and rugs and bowed politely after. He danced on stilts and played the flute. Oh, how he made the poor thing toot. He wore a jingly-tingly suit and dangled from a rafter. His greatest show came once a month, when every man and beast would gather on the castle lawn to join the royal feast. Oh, what a day of food and song! The knights played daring games. Sylvester made the rules, of course, and gave them silly names. A jousting match called tickle toss. You need a 10-foot feather. And target topple archery. To win, you must be clever. Then, when at last the games were through, they gathered round the moat, and splash! They hopped in all at once to slosh and wash and float. This is how the royal feast was run by dear Sylvester, until one day he watched the crowd and something struck the jester. "Oh dear," he told the king and queen, "there's something awfully wrong. Those orange-spotted bingles, see? They're strange. They don't belong." The king and queen stood up and stared, and instantly they both declared, "My boy, you're right. We must be spared. Please, have them move along." And after that, a sign went up outside the castle wall. "No orange-spotted bingles, please," it said. And that was all. The royal feast soon came again. Sylvester watched the crowd, and spying something very odd, he spoke his mind out loud. "Oh, dearest queen, oh, grandest king, I notice now an awful thing. Those bingles there with hair like string, with curly cues that sprout and spring, they're odd as owls without a wing. They ought not to be allowed." The king and queen forthright agreed, and so the castle sign decreed, "No orange-spotted bingles, please, no curly-headed bingles, please," for everyone to read. Sylvester now surveyed his feast. His puffed-up pride was double, but when the king and queen looked down, he knew he was in trouble. "Sylvester," called the crooning king, "I fear I have bad tidings. The queen and I are quite displeased by all of these abidings, for there are bingles in this crowd with stout and skinny features. and naturally we can't allow such odd, unhealthy creatures." Sylvester gazed upon his belt. His knees felt just like jelly, because he knew that he was stout, especially round the belly. So now Sylvester stood outside and read the castle sign. "No orange-spotted Bingles, please. No curly-headed Bingles, please. No stout or skinny Bingles, please." Then he shuffled down the hill and left his home behind. A month had passed, or maybe 2, since he'd left the castle. Sylvester sat and moped and moaned, tugging on a tassel. Then out of nowhere, through the sky, there roared a streak of fire. A dragon spouting streams of smoke. It growled and glided higher. "It's heading for the castle walls," Sylvester gasped in fear. "The king and queen will both be trapped. What shall I do? Oh, dear." "It serves them right," snapped Sir Gawain, for he was orange-spotted. "Who needs their kind?" said Lady Lydd, and all the others nodded. The sky was now as black as soot, the castle lost in smoke. Sylvester struggled through the crowd, and angrily he spoke. "Listen, please, for I'm to blame. 'Twas I who told the king that orange spots and curly hair were not a normal thing. I'm sorry for this sad mistake, for I was very wrong. It isn't spots or skin or hair, but hearts that make us strong. Now here's our chance to show the king just what we have inside, and that a Bingle can't be judged by belly, hair, or hide. Now gather round, I have a plan, I think you'll find it keen. Together we can prove ourselves and save the king and queen." The dragon held the king and queen inside the banquet hall. He made them clean the cupboards bare while he devoured it all. He roasted rugs and chairs and stairs and piles of precious things, and now his fearsome fiery eyes were glaring at the king. Through the door Sylvester charged, the archers at his side. The dragon roared around to fight, and arrows hailed his hide. Suction cups clamped up his mouth and blinded both his eyes. He writhed and rumbled round the room, scratching at the skies. Now the jousting knights appeared, their feathers at the ready. The dragon swung his scaly tail, but the knights held steady. They bore down on his ticklish toes, their skill so very clever. The dragon reeled away so fast, he did not feel the window blast. The castle walls went rumbling past, till splash! He struck the moat at last, and quenched his fire forever. The king and queen were overjoyed. They hugged and kissed Sylvester. "Oh, please forgive us," they implored. "Come back and be our jester." From that day on, the king and queen made all the Bingles proud by putting up a sign that said, "Bingles all allowed." It didn't matter what the skin looked like. It didn't matter what their hair looked like. It didn't matter if they were round or skinny. In the end, everybody was right. Everybody is okay. And it just doesn't matter what people look like. All right? It doesn't matter what is happening on the outside. Everybody is to be loved. We are to be friends with everybody. And we are to especially be interested in helping everybody to be right with God. Now, that reminds me of a Bible story, and this one isn't very long. And so I'll read it, and you'll know why I chose this one. When we talk about Zacchaeus, we sing the song about Zacchaeus, don't we? In Luke chapter 19, you can read about Zacchaeus in verses 1 through 10. But here's a book that tells us about Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus gathered taxes from people low and high. The way he lived, he seemed to be a very wealthy guy. He wasn't very nice, you see. He was also very short. Zacchaeus had no friends at all. They didn't like his sort. Suddenly a shout went up, "The Lord is coming near," and the people ran to line the road, pushing to see and hear. Zacchaeus saw the crowd and said, "I wish that I were tall. I'm much too small for this big crowd. I cannot see at all." Zacchaeus ran ahead and saw a tall, tall sycamore tree. He said, I'll find a sturdy branch to climb so I can see. So he climbed this sycamore and watched the dusty trail. He waited for the Lord to pass. He'd see him without fail. The Lord looked up in the tree, and the people heard him say, Zacchaeus, you come down here. I'll visit you today. The crowd began to grumble. Should Jesus eat with him? Zacchaeus lies and cheats us. His life is full of sin. He steals a certain portion of taxes that we pay. His purse is overflowing. He gets richer every day. They didn't think the master should visit in his home. They thought it would be better to leave this crook alone. Zacchaeus was quite flustered at what the people said, and as he walked with Jesus, he simply bowed his head. At home, he turned to Jesus and said, I want to share half of my possessions with those who need some care. And if I've cheated anyone, I'll pay him 4 times more. People here will see I've changed from what I was before. The Lord was pleased with what he heard this tax collector say and said, God's free salvation has come to you today. Jesus came to seek the lost, to set the sinner free. He died and rose for each of us and says, come, follow me. That's what I want to leave you with today. The message that says that Jesus came and died for everybody. No matter what language they speak, no matter what color their skin is, no matter what their hair might look like, no matter where in the world they live, Jesus came and died for every single one of us. And that's what we need to remember. And so as you go to school, or you go about your neighborhood, and you go about the streets of Midland, or wherever you are, or wherever you live, every time you look at somebody, understand that no matter what they look like on the outside, Jesus came and died for them. And we need to love them. And we need to help them to be right with God. We need to open up the Bible and teach them about Jesus and the fact that he left heaven and came down and lived so that they can go to heaven and be with him. And so, while this country seems to be so divided, we need to understand that Jesus is able to unite us, and we simply need to be able to put all of that prejudice aside, and we need to just look at people who have a soul and strive to help them to be right with God. Now, you do that today as you go about your day, and think about every person you see, no matter what they look like on the outside. You remember and you remind yourself they have a soul, and we need to teach them about Jesus and how much he loves them. I'm telling you that Jesus loves you, and that you have every right, because of Jesus, to be in a right relationship with God, no matter what you look like. And so I want to remind you that today, and I want you to be kind and loving to everyone that you see all the time. All right? You have a good day, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time, all right? Bye-bye.